Islamic rogue regimes rank among the leaders of the Unholy alliance of state-sponsored global narco-terrorism. Narco-terrorism has become a most effective weapon, economically and operationally, in the battle against the key opponent of rogue regimes, the USA, the Great Satan. These rogue regimes are engaged in narco-terrorism in order to bankroll global terrorist operations and undermine U.S. homeland security, corrupt the morality and social fabric of the U.S. population, and erode the confidence of Americans in the capability of their own government to ensure safety. Driven by ideology and greed, Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, Hamas, and additional Palestinian, Arab, and Islamic terror organizations have targeted the U.S. throughout the globe and on the mainland, establishing beachheads in Central and South America and hundreds of sleeper cells in the U.S. and Canada. The deep roots of the narco-terrorist threat to the U.S. and the free world were spotlighted by the Congressional Research Service in a January 5, 2010 report and by Anthony Placido, the intelligence chief of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, during his March 3, 2010 testimony before the House Government Reform Subcommittee on National Security. More than 31,000 Americans, or approximately 10 times the number of people killed in September 11, 2001, die each year as direct result of drug abuse. It is important to note that this is not an emerging threat per se, but one that has existed since the late 1980s or early 1990s. 18 of the 44 designated international terrorist groups have been linked to some aspects of the international drug trade. The nexus between drugs and terrorism is well established, and the threat to our national security in the USA is evident. Some drug trafficking organizations based in the Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay tri-border area, which has a large Muslim population, have ties to the radical Islamic terrorist groups such as Hezbollah. There are numerous reports of cocaine proceeds entering the coffers of Islamic radical groups such as Hezbollah and Hamas in Europe and the Middle East. During the 1970s and 1980s, Arafat's and Mahmoud Abbas' PLO controlled clandestine laboratories in Lebanon, laying some of the foundations for the current narco-terrorism infrastructure, which boosted their stashed bank accounts. According to Western law enforcement agencies, 40% of the PLO's weaponry acquisition was financed by heroin, hashish, and morphine trafficking. Much of the heroin consumed in the USA and West Europe was supplied by Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, the PLO, and other terror organizations in return for Soviet bloc military supplies. Tom Smith, a retired FBI Deputy Director for Intelligence, stated in a March 1988 interview with the El Paso Times that the PLO's large contingency in Nicaragua aimed to facilitate a narco-terror offensive against the USA. Narco-terrorism in the service of America's enemies was discussed by Dr. Vanessa Newman, Senior Fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, in a December 2011 electronic note. Accordingly, Venezuela and Iran are strong allies. Iran also has a growing direct influence in Latin America, spurred by three principal motivations. 1, a quest for uranium. 2, a quest for gasoline. 3, a quest for a base of operations that it closed to the U.S. in order to position itself to resist diplomatic and military pressure, possibly by setting up a missile base within striking distance of the mainland USA, as the Soviets did in the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, Hezbollah, and Al-Qaeda have training camps, recruiting bases, and networks of mutual assistance in Venezuela, as well as throughout the continent. Latin America is an increasing source of funding for Middle Eastern terrorism. Hezbollah has high-level officials directly involved in the South American cocaine trade and its most violent cartels, including the Mexican gang Los Zetas. The tri-border area of Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay, South America's busiest contraband and smuggling center, has long been an ideal breeding ground for terrorist groups. Narco-terrorism, harnessed by Islam-driven terrorism, constitutes a most sinister weapon, aiming to maim and murder the soul and the body of free societies. Engagement in or adulation of narco-terrorism on the one hand, and claiming to be engaged in the pursuit of peace on the other hand, is a classic oxymoron. A prerequisite for a successful campaign of counterterrorism requires the uprooting of regimes and individuals which are involved in narco-terrorism, financially, politically, diplomatically, or operationally. The next video will highlight misperceptions surrounding Jewish settlements in Judea and Samaria.